The cameras are rolling into the bright flames of the future for VFX. Welcome to the VideoForge.net and welcome back. We are in part 3 of this Dragon Ball Z Saiyan Space Pod VFX animation series, which is also viewed on YouTube. It's time to finally add our 3D elements into our groundbreaking scene. I've been trying new intros for the VideoForge, and I have to say, this was my best one yet. I think I'm sticking with it. What do you guys think? Leave your ideas on what you think the intro should be. Let's jump right to it. Okay, so if you've been following along with the series in After Effects, you'd notice our haze layers over the Earth are invisible. That's because we have a parallel light in the composition, but the haze layers are accepting lights, given they are a 3D layer. All we have to do now is just tap AA on our keyboard, and then we're going to turn the accept lights to off. And that's just for both layers. All right, let's move on. So let's import our Saiyan spaceship. Now, once again, the file is free for download. I hope you all enjoy the model. Maybe come up with some cool animations of your own and then show me what you can do. Let's go ahead and create a new solid. And in the effects and presets, or the FX console, if you have it, go ahead and search for element. We'll drop that onto our layer. I'm going to go ahead and shut off all the layers, like the haze and the stars and the flare, and I'm just going to leave the earth along with our element layer. Let's open up our scene and drop our space pod model into the viewport. You can click on the normalized size, but it's going to be too big for the composition. Now, I only made it big enough in the first place because I put myself inside the space pod. It actually made the workflow a lot easier because I didn't actually have to use a camera to zoom in so close. Okay, let's go ahead and open up the space pod layer. And here you're going to see 6 different materials that I was so lazy not to rename, but you can click on them to see which material belongs to which. You have the front door, the base of the pod, the glass window, the window frame, the inside padding, and the chair. At this point, if you have Pro Shaders 1 or 2 or any kind of fabric and metal shaders, then you're going to go ahead and texture this pod any way you see fit. It's all up to you. I'm going to go ahead and use the simple metal textures that I usually would use, and for the inside, I'm going to use fabric. And when you're applying materials onto your model, I do recommend using the materials already used in case you ever need to change the specular or the gloss amounts on the material. So try not to use duplicate materials unless you're really looking to make something strange. Now for the environment, I downloaded a few space maps to see which would look beneficial to the composition. I tried the Milky Way environment and it was way too dark. With our flare and earth in the scene, the model would show more contrast and vibrance on reflections, so I went for the earth map. You can simply Google earth wallpapers to see which looks best for yours. I like to have reflections on models like this, but the reflection on the space pod is just way too potent. So we're going to work on that a bit later after we get a visual as to what our model would look like in the scene. Now, I'm looking to add 2 space pods. Notice when adding the space pod, it was placed in a group layer. While I appreciate the sentiment, I'm looking to make these pods different from one another. So we're just going to go ahead and drag the pod layer out of the group. I'll go ahead and just delete that as well. Now let's duplicate the model and change the second pod from group 1 to group 2. Now I'm going to go ahead and hop back into the Pro Shaders tab and give the second pod maybe a different texture. It may not even be noticeable in the composition, but it's just the little things that make you stand out as a VFX artist. All right, we are all set for now in the scene setup. Let's go ahead and click OK and close this out. So here's our extremely shiny space pod. Now let's go ahead and start working on animating these space pods. Let's start with the first pod in group 1. We're going to go ahead and open that up. And in the group utilities, we'll create a group null. With the group null, you'll have total control of the space pod's position and the rotation in 3D space. So I'm going to go ahead and rename it to pod 1. Now it's time to choose where you want these pods to come into frame. A quick lesson. Now, when it comes to films, you don't want certain elements to make an appearance at an exact time. For example, you watch a movie and you look at a scene, never will you see a scene that lasts for 2 minutes flat, but rather you'd see a scene lasting maybe around 2 minutes and 13 seconds. So here in our composition, I want to start the animation of the space pod coming in at maybe around 1.16 seconds. I'm not going to set a keyframe yet. I'm just going to go ahead and place the pod where it needs to be first. So I'm just going to go ahead and go to the top layer here. And you can follow along if you're still here with me. You can also place your model anywhere you want in the scene, just anywhere to start from. But just remember, we're filling up the negative space. Okay, this is a good spot. So I'm gonna set a keyframe for the position. Then I'm gonna move all the way to the very end of the frame, and I'm gonna go ahead and place the pod further into Z space. But remember, I'm also making sure the model goes past the parallel light. For the second pod, I'm just gonna go ahead and shut it off for the moment, just so I can see what I'm working with. Okay, so I see the pot is a bit off course, so we're going to go ahead and just move it over a bit towards the earth. You can also hold shift while moving the position to make it move twice the value. Okay, let's go ahead and go back to our active camera and let's see what we got. Nice, nice. I actually like that. Now I see there's a seam in the way of the front of the texture, but we're going to go ahead and fix that a little bit later. I'd say thanks for watching and leave you to it, but I'm not going to leave you all hanging like that. We're going to build this whole scene from start to finish, so let's move on to the next step. So I'm going to go ahead and shut off the first group. I'm going to turn on the second group here. And we're going to be doing the exact same thing, but only this time we're moving the starting point of the animation at a later time. You can simply just copy and paste the keyframes from the first group, but we're not lazy here at the Video Forge. We like to stand out and do our best to make our workflow organic. So go ahead and create a group null for group 2. Let's go ahead and rename this to pod 2. I'm going to go ahead and set a keyframe here, but move the keyframe at the end. And since we're here at 3.23 seconds, let's go ahead and we can actually start our animation from here. So I'll just make a few adjustments on the position. All right, that looks pretty cool. Let's go ahead and turn the group 1 pod back on, and let's take a look at them both together. And you see, we really didn't have to add any curvature to the animation. It's moving in a straight line, but with the camera's rolling rotation, it makes our animation seem like it's doing just a bit more when it really isn't. All right, before we take this to the next level, let's do a little brightness and contrast with the physical environment. So let's go ahead and mess with the exposure a bit. And for the gamma, we're going to, let's set it around 80 or so. What you don't want to do is crush the blacks too much. Let's go ahead and rotate the environment a bit on the x-axis. And just a bit for the y-axis as well. It's just we're trying to blend the environment together on the space pods. And you can see that we get more of darkness of space on the actual model. But it's fine because that's why we can go back into the scene setup for Element 3D and make a few more adjustments. But before we even go back into the scene setup, let's go ahead and tweak a few more settings. We're going to go ahead and add motion blur, but that's coming right out of Element 3D. Now we're doing this because the camera's motion blur doesn't really give you that fluid trail from the motion blur that you want. But in Element 3D, you have full control with just a few clicks. So let's go ahead and turn on the motion blur for the element layer. And then we're going to go inside the motion blur tab in Element. And we're going to go ahead and change it from comp settings to on. Now for now, let's set the shutter angle to about 350. You see, the higher you go with the shutter angle, the closer the blur samples will be from one another. And I'll set the blur samples itself to about 20, so we can fill that gap just a bit. Let's move to a different frame and we're going to see the motion blur a bit better. All right, it's looking good. So we'll go ahead and turn that motion blur off just for now. Next, what we want to do is add some random rotation to the pods. So let's go to the start of the animation for the first space pod. And we're going to go to the particle look, and under particle rotation, where the rotation random is located, let's just move this over a bit so we can all see. All right, we're going to go ahead and set a keyframe. Now think about this for a second. There's no gravity in space. And objects that are bigger than my ego tend to move pretty slow from a distance. So it's like looking at an airplane in the sky, and then you see it's moving really slow, but in reality, the average commercial airplane, it's cruising for about 400 to 500 knots. So that's well in between 460 to 575 miles an hour in the air. But that's just the airspeed. So ground speed, we're talking maybe about 300 to 600 nautical miles per hour. So think outside the box just a bit when adding random rotation to the space pods. Now, you can make the pods rotate in one direction, but this isn't bowling. Our pods are going to look like they were knocked around a few by some asteroids before coming to Earth. So you're going to see a little bit of random rotation, but slowly and subtle. So let's go ahead and set a keyframe for the rotation random. And we're going to move it all the way to the end of the frame. And let's set it to about 350. Now, it may look like a lot, but remember, it's moving at a random rotation, so it's going to rotate slow enough. And now we're going to do the exact same thing for the second space pod. We'll set the keyframe at the beginning, and at the end, we're going to go ahead and set it at 270, just to keep it different from one another. Okay, so now let's mess with the parallel light a bit. What we're going to do is that we're going to play with the point of interest. Now, I want to try to put a nice highlight on the edge of the space pod. So I'm just going to move it around a bit. Okay, I'm actually liking that. I actually like it a lot. All right, I hope you guys are enjoying this tutorial just as much as I am. Let's go ahead and render this out and let's see how this looks. Wow. Really digging this so far. It makes me tempted to kind of build a whole movie trailer for Dragon Ball Super. We're going to call it Dragon Ball Supreme. Huh? How about that? Okay, so now we have a visual on what the pods look like in space with our whole composition. So let's make just a few more tweaks on the pod. It's almost time to add our atmospheric haze and the color correction. But before we do all of that, we're going to go ahead and blend our model just a little bit more into the overall space scene. So let's hop back into the scene setup for Element 3D. Now, remember when I told you to not use duplicate shade of materials on just one object? And this is why, because you want to go in to just one shading material, make a few adjustments, and it's going to correct it all together as a unit. So we'll go to our metal texture, or the metal texture that you use, for the base of the space pod, and we're going to bring the glossiness down just a bit. We're going to do the exact same thing with the specular multiplier. And now you see there's still a bit of a reflection, but it's not as reflective. And we have more of a flat, glossy surface. We're going to do the same thing to the second pod. Just going to bring down the glossiness just a touch. And I'm going to bring the specular down a touch as well. We'll go ahead and click OK. And now we're getting somewhere. So let's go ahead and add a curves adjustment to the element layer. We're going to go ahead and darken it a bit, and then we're going to bring back some of that contrast that we lost earlier. Okay, so now it's not really necessary, but the glass window needs a little touch up as well. Now that we applied that curves adjustment, we can hop inside and wash out that environment reflection a bit and make our pod look like it's been worn out and that it's lost its shiny reflection. Space is bone chilling cold, so you're not going to see that usual shiny reflection on a window. You're going to see like a frosty faded window, but with a hint of reflection. All right, that actually looks pretty awesome. I'm just going to go ahead and do the same exact thing to the window frame as well, just real quick, just so that everything blends together, because once we add some final color correction to the overall composition, it's all just going to blend in. All right, and finally, we're going to go ahead and touch up the curves adjustment just a bit. Just to blend the space pods into the background more, yet make it our focal point. All right, let's go ahead and save our work. Guys, save, 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 save. Everyone, please save your work. I can't tell you how many times I've gotten so deep into a project that I didn't save after 3 hours of work, and then the power shuts off or the program crashes. I get like Quagmire from Family Guy when he loses a game of golf.
God damn it! Come on! Come on! Shit! 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 Come on, Glenn! Come on! Get your head in the goddamn game! Ah!
Alright folks, that is it for part 3 of our mini-series. I seriously hope that you guys are enjoying this as much as I am. Please stay tuned for the mini-series finale when we add some lens dirt, noise, and some final color correction to the whole composition, blending everything together. If you all have any like suggestions or on like what tutorial you'd like to see next, just please leave it in the comments. Subscribe, follow the Video Forge on Instagram, and visit the website, thevideoforge.net, and keep up to date with the blogs. I'm still building the website as I go, so all I ask is for your patience. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you soon.